The people went crazy. Even the woke, well-educated, liberal, white women in the area who say refugees welcome suddenly went, but not on my doorstep.
Mm.
I'm watching the country dying, and it's just slow. We say it's dying, it's really being murdered. It's being murdered by our politicians and our elite class because war is always coming. Always down the line is a war. So we need to make sure we're self-sufficient in many things, and food production is one of them.
Okay, it's No Risk, No Reward Media. I'm speaking with Nick Buckley this morning. Very happy to be joined by Mr. Nick Buckley. He is an entrepreneur. He's a community leader. He's a public servant and also the founder of the Mancunian Way. That might give it away where he's from here. And he also describes himself as a man on a mission. Nick, welcome. And what mission in particular are you on at this present time?
Thank you for having me on your show. The mission I mean is the mission we all should be on, and it's to save this great nation of ours. I'm watching the country dying, and it's just slow. We say it's dying, it's really being murdered. It's being murdered by our politicians and our elite class. And my mission is to save this country. That's the mission.
Yeah, murdered is a good expression. It's almost like it's been throttled or
Mm.
suffocated at the moment. It's a slow, long, slow, laborious death, becoming increasingly more painful. And as we know, we've seen over the years that when you get put on a so-called pathway to death in the NHS, it can be a
Mm.
long, drawn-out affair, but it ends up in death nonetheless. And when you look at some of the people that are in government at the minute, especially since, I mean, like the Tories did a bad enough job in their reign of terror. But now, since July, Labour seem to be going hammer and tongs to outdo them in just about every area of screwing over the public. One of which, in particular, I want to talk to you about. Well, there'll be two or three actually, but the first one of which is farmers. British farmers
Mm.
are getting a very raw deal. Have been for a long time. At the moment, there's a new proposal that they will pay inheritance tax in farms over a certain value. That's causing a lot of unhappiness. Talk about betrayal that's ultimately culminating in a protest in London today. What are your thoughts on Reeves's amendment of inheritance tax laws with regards to British farmers in the last budget?
First of all, I hope that the weather today doesn't affect the turnout with the farmers, because if it's a low turnout due to the weather, the government will claim a victory there, going, look, the farmers aren't that really bothered about it, are they? Only 10 turned up, so I hope the weather doesn't stop them. The farmer thing is a little bit more complicated than we think. So, first of all, we need to remember this is an island. We don't produce all our own food. Every decade, we produce less and less and less. Hitler nearly starved us to death and starved us out of the Second World War because we didn't produce enough of our food. That has to be in our memory because war is always coming. Always down the line is a war. So, we need to make sure we're self sufficient in many things, and food production is one of them. Farmers themselves have got so much red tape and bureaucracy on their shoulders due to governments over the last 70 years. And then we wonder why we've got to give them subsidies to keep the farms going. We wonder why we import fruit and veg from Spain and meat from over the world because it's cheaper. Well, why is it cheaper? It's because it's not fair on UK farmers because they've got to live up to a much higher standards to produce food here, so we buy it cheaper elsewhere. And then with the inheritance tax, this is the final nail in the coffin for many family-owned farms. Some farms don't make it and go in bankrupt anyway. The farms who are just about making it work really hard, but then when they want to pass that farm on to their son or their daughter, what Labour's proposing is now you're going to pay inheritance tax. So you're going to have to inherit the lands, go to the bank, get a loan if you can, because you might not be able to get a loan because the bank will go, you're not making any money on this farm. But let's say you can get a loan, you've got to pay that loan back. That'll be enough to push so many farmers into bankruptcy if they can get the loan in the first place. And then what will happen on those farmlands? Big businesses will come along and buy it up and all bank the land or turn it into wind farms or solar panels or housing estates, and we'll lose more and more land, and our countryside will end up changing the way it looks at the moment. And I don't see how farmers can allow this to begin with, and how as a country we should allow this, because Farmland is really, really important to us. And the best thing about the farmers is they've got the public on their side. I'm against the Free Palestine marches. I'm against the Just Stop Oil marches for causing inconvenience. I'll put up with some inconvenience if it's for the farmers.
Mm. You mentioned as well there about farming is traditionally a family, an intergenerational business. You know, most farmers inherited from their parents who inherited
Mm,
from theirs, and on it goes. And you also mentioned that, okay, saying there is an inheritance tax liability, you go to the bank possibly and take out a loan that you could pay back, but they won't lend you because you can't show that you have any income. In the past, for inheritance tax planning, usually if people were hit with a big inheritance tax bill, which in the past had to be paid before the estate was released, many banks would give bridging loans. So if you had a house or a property that you had as capital, the bank would say, okay, you sell that, you pay back the bridging loan, and then you keep the balance. The
mm.
problem with farmers, and people have put that, well, just sell some of the farm, or just sell a part of the farm. Can't normally do that because maybe nobody wants a quarter of a farm, or which quarter do you sell, or do you get a better or a worse price depending on whether or not you would sell the whole thing as a package. So they're kind of over a barrel. A lot of people are saying, well, what's the problem? You know, you've got a £4 million farm. You want us to feel sorry for you because you're going to have to pay a certain percentage of that tax. You keep the difference. It's putting you out of a family business, number one.
Mm.
Maybe these people don't know what to do when they come out of that business. And number three, you know, it's this these are our food producers. These are the
Mm.
people that are putting food on our tables, and they may be asset rich, which most farmers are, but they very often are cash poor, or they're just about scrimping through after busting their asses week in, week out. So I don't think people really understand the mechanics of farming, or what's actually involved in wrapping a farm up if they do get out of the business.
To me, this is one of Labour's policies of envy. They look at the farmers and they go, "You're just like a 19th century land gentry, and you own all this. You didn't earn and get this. You were given this, and they probably stole it off someone else, and that's how you got this land. You're like the bourgeoisie. We're the proletariat. We've got to punish you for stealing that land in the first place. This is just a Labour policy of envy, just like the VAT on schools."
Mhm. One other thing, actually, just you mentioned that about acquisition of farmland. There's a high profile farmer who's in London today, I believe, in the shape and form of Jeremy Clarkson.
Mm,
And one of the things Rachel Reeves said she wanted to do was close the loophole where people were coming in and buying farms as investments. And then whenever they died, you know, an inheritance tax move to avoid inheritance tax, or paying inheritance tax. Which again, you know, if that's a loophole, then that's a loophole. Maybe it should
mm.
only apply to new investors in farmland, but it should not apply to intergenerational farmers, or the farm has been shown to be in the business or in the family for a very, very long time. With this protest that's going on in London as we speak, I believe. It's not the only one that's happening. Irish farmers are up in arms at the
Mm.
moment. French farmers, I believe, were protesting yesterday as well. We had the massive Dutch farming protest that happened last year because it was effectively they attempted a land grab on them. Also, it seems to be it's not isolated to just one part of Britain or one part of Europe. This seems to be a blanket thing that's going on, literally, to get their hands on priceless farmland.
Yeah, do you remember what happened 18 months ago in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, the government was overthrown in Sri
Yeah.
Lanka, and look at the state that that place has been in ever since.
Yeah, all because the government was pushing net zero, started banning farmers from using fertilizers because of how much chemicals are in it, whatever. They couldn't produce enough food. The people got hungry and they tore the government down. This is what can happen if you keep pushing the people and pushing the people. I don't think for one moment we're anywhere near that in this country,
Mhm.
but that's where it can lead to.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the key. These things have to start somewhere, and
Mm,
it's a little bit like when you talked about Britons being murdered at the moment. That it's a strangulation or a suffocation. It doesn't happen immediately. It
mm,
literally drains the life from you step by step. I think this is the beginning of what could be a very slippery slope that we're heading down, because when you interfere with food supply,
mm,
and the government starts to try and gain some control over the nation's food supply, well, that's the most important lever that they could have when it comes to people doing what they're told. If you don't do what you're told, maybe you don't get to eat further down the line if this reaches
Yeah.
its final destination. So I think that's why there's such a pushback against this, not just from the farmers who may stand to lose their land and their livelihood, but people are. I don't know anyone that's against this in terms of
Mm.
public support. I think them farmers are unreasonable. No, they're the ones that put food on our tables. And if we didn't have that, and as the farmers have pointed out, they can escalate this. They could escalate this to withholding food and
Mm.
the supermarket shelves go empty. You saw what it was like in 2020, people
Yeah.
scrambling to buy toilet rolls and paracetamols. Could you imagine what it'll be like if people are queuing around the block to get a loaf of bread or to get some milk or to get
Yeah.
some eggs or whatever it happened, and they're not there? Can you imagine even 3 days what that would do to the nation?
I know exactly what that would be like because I've seen it on TV and it's called Soviet Russia
Hmm.
2, 3, 4 decades ago. And that's exactly where all our socialist governments for the last 70 years, apart from Thatcher, all the rest of them have been socialist governments. Even the Tories have been socialist. That's where they're taking us. They're taking us to their vision of Soviet Russia. And I don't want to go on that journey.
No, and neither do the farmers, and it would look like they have the support of many of the
Yeah.
public. I'm just looking here at a report. Environment Secretary Steve Reed has commented and said, "We've had to ask those with the broadest shoulders to pay a little bit more." He added, "The vast majority of farmers will pay nothing even after the changes." So he's effectively saying, "Look, we want the richest, biggest farmers. They've got broad shoulders. They will take the brunt of this, but most people won't worry too much about it. Why should they take the brunt of it when money is being taken and squandered on overseas climate packages or funding overseas wars to the tunes of billions for as long as it takes in the eyes of the government? Why should farmers have to take the brunt with broad shoulders when money's obviously not being managed effectively by the current administration?"
Exactly. We're not a poor country. We're an extremely rich country. We're not short of money in this country, but we're running out of money because the government keeps spending it incorrectly. They have different priorities to what the public have. We've just promised Africa 12 billion to look at climate change. We're constantly funding Ukraine. Ukraine's complicated. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm
Mm.
just saying we find money for Ukraine.
Yeah.
We've just funded some guy who's not even British, who lives in a European country. We've just funded him £200,000 to research the history of homosexual pornography.
Mm.
We, we keep wasting money across the board, and then we go back to the taxpayer and farmers and we go, you need to pay more. No, the answer is we need to slash the size of the state. The state does too much. It does it all poorly. We're funding things people don't want. There's too many projects that a minister just likes, so we fund it. We need to slash the size of the state. It's too big, and we're turning into Soviet Russia, like I said.
Yeah, step by step. And just to round this off, again, depending who you talk to, they'll say, "Well, it's nothing much to be concerned about." Other people would say it's a massive concern. So the government says it will only affect the wealthiest 500 estates each year. So on one side, you have the government saying 500 estates each year. That's not many, really. That they're positioning it that way. But the NFU, the National Farmers Union, and the Country Land and Business Association have estimated up to 70,000 farms could be affected. So on one side, you've got 500, the government saying it's only the top 500 will be affected. On the other side, you have the actual farmers union and the so-called Country and Land and Business Association say, no, you're 500, you're looking at 70,000 here. So those are pretty wide estimates on who might be affected. I know which side I would fall on there, and it definitely wouldn't be on the government's.
Exactly. And let's take the government's stats as fact. 500 a year will be affected. How many farmers die every year? There's not tens and tens of thousands of farmers dying every year, and we're only going to tax the top 500. It's probably, I don't know the figure, but it won't be that many farmers who are dying who are then trying to pass on their farm to their children anyway. So just using the term 500 farms is a smokescreen. They need to tell us out of all the farmers who die every year, what percentage of them will be taxed.
Mm.
That's the figure I want to know because it could be 70, 80% of all farmers are taxed.
Well, we're talking about farmers here, and they're being affected, obviously, by the new Labour government. Other people that have been affected, or will certainly be affected by the new Labour government, are pensioners.
Mm,
And for a long time, when Starmer was trying to woo the electorate post pre-election, he was zoning in, we'll look after our old folk, we'll make sure that they're well taken care of, they won't be cold in the wintertime. And then, of course, it was announced that the winter fuel payments would be axed for very, very many pensioners. And, the government didn't seem to pay a blind bit of notice to that. It was probably one of the most unpopular things that I've seen a government do in recent history, but they plowed on with it anyway. I'm looking at DWP, Department for Works and Pensions, have issued a new winter fuel payment update for pensioners in the UK. So they've explained they've sent letters to millions of pensioners between October the 7th and November the 4th, urging those who were unsure to check their potential entitlement to pension credit. Think about that just for a second. They left it until October, when we're into the autumn time, to send millions of letters to pensioners to check and see whether or not they're entitled to pension credit. Nick, I don't know about you. I hate forms. I hate online,
mm,
digital this, digital that. An old pensioner gets a letter through, their heads all over the place. They may be alone. They don't understand what's going on. They've no way maybe to get out, to get to a local centre to talk about this, or they certainly can't have the capacity to go online and do this sort of stuff online.
mm.
So the result is the letter goes in the drawer, maybe ends up in the bin, maybe doesn't get open in the first place, and in the meantime, they freeze. And it's affecting up to 10 million people following the Labour government's decision on winter fuel payment eligibility. Over 10 million people above state pension age will no longer receive up to £300. That's a lot. That's a seventh, roughly,
Mm.
of the British population.
Yeah, first of all, there's a question about should the winter fuel allowance ever been created in the first place under Gordon Brown? That's a different discussion, but we have it. And once you give people a benefit, people then plan their lives around having that benefit. To remove it then feels like they've lost something important, which many people have. So this Labour government seem to have it in for pensioners, and we need to figure out why. First of all, pensioners more likely to use the NHS, which is failing. If we can get rid of some pensioners, that will help the NHS. The winter fuel allowance costs 1.4 billion a year. Sounds a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's absolutely nothing. We're spending 6, 7 billion a year on housing in hotels, illegal immigrants. So when you compare it to that, it's a fraction of the cost. I'm surprised Labour did this because Labour were sat in Parliament a couple of years ago speaking to the Tory Prime Minister, going, "We've heard you're going to cut the winter fuel allowance. This is disgraceful. We would never do that. You're going to kill all those grannies and granddads." And we've just done a report. We've commissioned an independent report that says so many thousand pensioners are going to die every year if you cut this benefit. They get into power within weeks. They're cutting the thing they said they would never cut. And the Tories were evil for even thinking about it. So not only have they done what they said they weren't going to do, and now they've put some pensions in danger. For us, it's also the hypocrisy of this government. You cannot build, I mean, all politicians lie. Let's get that fact out there. They all lie. But this Labour government have taken it to new heights of barefaced lying to people.
Well, yeah, it's almost like it's in their DNA, and the audacity, though, that the fact that they actually done the research themselves.
Mm,
This is the result. If you do this, don't do it, and then they get into power
yeah.
and they go ahead and do exactly the same thing. And the ironic thing is, when they've been questioned about this, what impact do you think this will have on the nation's elderly over the winter? Well, we're not quite sure about that. They've already done the report, published
Yeah.
it themselves when they were in opposition. And again, the DWP, Department for Work and Pension, is actively promoting the pension credit take-up plan, encouraging older individuals to claim by the 21st of December 2024, with successful successful claims eligible for a backdated winter fuel payment. But again, 21st of December 2024, that's slap bang in the middle of the winter. What happens if you miss that deadline? What happens if you just say, okay, I finally got online, I finally navigated the system, it's the 22nd of December, 3 days before Christmas? What do you do in that case? A new online petition has been launched urging the government to immediately reverse means testing of winter fuel payments, and on it goes. Let's be honest about it. They're not going to pay any attention to an online petition. It doesn't matter if 500,000 pensioners shuffle down to Whitehall tomorrow morning to protest against this. They're just going to look at it and say, look, we understand. We understand that it's tough, but we've got a 22 billion black hole that the Tories left us, and we're going to make you freeze to plug 1.4 billion of that. That just seems to be their mindset, and there's no moving them on it.
And if you look at the 1.4 billion savings, like I say, it sounds a lot, but it's not. But it's still a chunk of money. The NHS have come out now saying this policy is going to cost them 0.4 billion by pensioners turning up cold and hypothermia and extra complications to people. So the NHS now have just spent 0.4 billion. So now there's a billion savings. Credit pensions are saying the more people who sign up for credit pension, that we're going to have to pay them out. So that billion is now coming down. It looks like at the moment, if they're lucky, they're going to save something like 500 million, which is 500 million. I mean, we really are talking about peanuts now. Again, this is ideological. This is a Stalinist socialist government looking at who are the people in society who deserve help and support. And pensioners don't deserve help and support for several reasons. The first reason is you're not productive anymore to the state. You're now a drain on the state. You're not productive. You're not one of the workers anymore. Another thing is more older people voted Brexit. More older people would vote Tory or Reform. So actually, you're not our people anyway. So I think this policy, again, is vindictive and it's ideologically driven. It's you're not our people. We're going to fund our people.
Vindictive and ideologically driven in relation to farmers, in relation to pensioners. Let's conclude this conversation this morning by turning our attention to homeless, of which there are an estimated up to 300,000 people at any one time homeless in Britain. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean street sleepers, which most people equate to being homeless. It means someone with nowhere to call their home. Could be living in a car, they could be sofa surfing, living in a hostel accommodation, whatever it happens to be. So again, the government have pledged, we need more houses. We need more houses. Angela Rayner's been talking about, we need more houses since July. And they had a very aggressive and, how would I say, optimistic view on what they were going to deliver in terms of new builds. Now we're into November, so they've been 4 months in position. I don't know how many homes they've actually built as per now, but every week that goes by, that's a few thousand more that are added to the rolling tally that needs to be built to solve Britain's homeless problems. Now, in your neck of the woods, Manchester way, there's been a place in particular in Altrincham, Crest Court Hotel in Altrincham, being used to accommodate asylum seekers. So people living nearby have recently, in a hotel which has recently started to accommodate nearly 300 asylum seekers, have spoken about the decision to house them there. All men, believed to be mainly from the African nation of Eritrea, are living at the Crest Court Hotel in Altrincham, Greater Manchester. And just before we came on, you were explaining to me that a homeless sleeper was found dead in your neck of the woods the other day. He didn't have a Crest Court hotel room or a hot shower in the morning or a warm breakfast to his name. What's going on in Altrincham?
So Altrincham is a rich suburb of Greater Manchester. It's very upper middle class. It's a lovely place. And there's a big hotel just next to the town centre. And one day it closed down, cancelled all the weddings. It's a place where you'd have a wedding function. You know, there's 300 bedrooms, they've got ballrooms, and it closed down. And all the people who'd booked it in next year or two have all been given refunds with no explanation. So everybody went, what's going on here? And then the government announced that's our new migrant hotel. Of course, the people went crazy. Even the woke, well-educated, liberal white women in the area who say refugees welcome suddenly went, but not on my doorstep,
Mm,
because this is opposite my girls' secondary school. I don't want it there. I want refugees in your area, on your estate, in someone else's town and village. I don't want it on my doorstep. I'm too good for this.
mm,
Now, and everyone's kicked off, and rightly so. So we need to understand, first of all, why have they placed the hotel there? Well, first of all, the hotel's ideal, 300 rooms, and the person who owns it is making a fortune out of it. The second point is it's a Labour council. It's Trafford Labour Council. So as a Labour government, you can say to Labour Council, you need to take this. Yeah, but the people will go crazy. Yeah, but if you don't take it, you guys will never be put forward to be an MP. You want to be an MP, don't you, in the next couple of years? You won't be, oh, okay, you can put it in our area. Which area should we put it in? Right, well, let's have a look who the councillors are. Let's look at what those people vote for at local elections. Altrincham have 3 Green Party MPs. The Green Party want open borders. Let's put it there because those local councillors want this. So if you live in Altrincham and you don't vote at elections, well, this is your fault. If you vote in elections and you vote Labour or you vote Green, well, this is also your fault.
mhm,
Now, don't vote Tory because the Tories have been doing this for 14 years. I don't know what your answer is. Is it reform? Is it independent? Is it some of you people standing up going, I'm going to run for office?
mhm,
That's what we need. But then last week, Manchester Evening News front page, a white British rough sleeper has been found dead outside the Palace Theatre Hotel. Where was his hotel? Where's his accommodation?
mhm,
So if you're a foreigner on a foreign continent and you make your way to our country, you're treated as if you've just won a game show. Yeah, you've won. Welcome to the 4-star Cresta Hotel.
mhm,
Here's a phone. We're employing people now to cook for you and clean for you. There's job advertisements now for cleaning these people's rooms every day and for cooking their food and stuff. You've won. Welcome to the UK.
yeah.
But if you're a Brit who's fallen on hard times and you're sleeping on the streets, it's like, we're not interested in you, mate. You're the wrong colour, you're the wrong nationality. We get no woke points for helping you. You can die. It's as simple as that. How we've allowed ourselves to get in this situation, how our borders are so open, how we've got a taxi service that picks people up in the English Channel and brings them here, how we allow our governments to spend it's like 6, 7 billion pound a year on illegal immigration hotels, as well as the 100 billion we're spending for everything else to do with immigration. When are the English people, the British people, going to say, do you know what? No more. It's time we put ourselves first. And do you know what? If it's unpopular to be selfish, then call me unpopular.
Yeah.
The British people need to come first. That's why we elect our MPs, not to be world politicians, but to be local politicians, to put us first. And hardly any of them do it. And the people to blame are me and you and everybody else because we're the ones who keep electing those people, or we're the ones who don't engage in democracy.
Listening to you talking there, obviously very passionately about this issue, you're not alone. Many people are feeling like this, and many more people are starting to feel like this, as evidenced by the fact that you referenced this is a very plush neighborhood. This is a well-heeled neighborhood. And as long as this problem in many people's eyes is out of sight, out of mind, let someone else deal with it. But then when it lands on their doorstep and the questions are being asked here, so for
Mm,
example, Nathan Evans, this is an article that the BBC published this morning, and Nathan Evans, who leads the Conservative opposition group on Trafford Borough Council,
mm,
has said that there were, quote, growing safety concerns within the community, unquote, and wanted the Labour-run authority to push for the urgent closure of this facility. Now, let's say he gets that. Let's say they get what they want. They close that hotel
mm.
down. They reopen it again to the public. Then does that not simply kick the can further down the road? Where are you going to put those men then? Are you going to find a more tolerant place, or people
Mm.
that won't protest somewhere a little bit out of the town centre a little bit? Let's do it on the QT here. All they're doing is simply moving the problem from A to B. And I'll say something at this point as well. And I've said this to you. You and I have spoke many times on TNT radio. The actual ethnicity or where these men came from is quite irrelevant, to the extent that where I live, there's a hotel in the town that I live in. Okay, let's say it can accommodate 300 men. If I was told, Rick, there's 300 men from Manchester, 300 Mancunians coming to live there, just men, I would have the same questions as I would if I was told they're coming from Timbuktu or from wherever in the world. There's this question: who are these men? Why are they coming here? Where are their families? And what are they going to do all day? And who's going to support them? So there's the fact of that, in case we're labeled as racists and people say, oh, you have no tolerance. But there's the added level to it that there are people here that have paid tax all their lives, that have paid their national insurance, that pay their council tax, maybe have fell on hard times, maybe don't have a roof over their head, maybe find themselves freezing to death as rough sleepers. Why are they not being accommodated as a priority? That is another dose of salt in the wounds for many people. And the closer it home gets to the middle classes or the more affluent areas, I think you'll start to see the kickback increase exponentially.
Absolutely. Let me follow up on 2 points there. First of all, Nathan Evans, leader of the Tories in Trafford. Who do you think caused this problem in the first place? 14 years of a Tory government. So none of us need advice and lectures off any elected Tory politician. Don't listen to them at all. And I'm sure he's against the hotel. But do you know what? It was this party that caused this problem in the first place. So the answer to this is not the Tories, honest. Do not fall for the Tory spin that this is disgraceful. We can fix this. You caused this and had 14 years, so don't listen to the Tories. I posted something on an Altrincham Facebook page the other day about this. Got loads of replies. Some of them quite negative towards me about, right wing rhetoric and stuff like that. But some of them who said it's right wing rhetoric, then went on to say, and this is the interesting bit, and they said something basically like, Nick, I know this is a problem. Nick, I don't want 300 migrants in my area, but I'm a compassionate person and I don't know what the answers are for this. But it sounds like you've got no answers and all you're doing is repeating right wing talking points. And that made me smile. Not because he called me right wing, because I'm not right wing, but because he's beginning to wake up. He's beginning to see this as a problem, but I'm still slightly brainwashed into thinking, but if I criticize it, it means I'm a right wing Nazi. But my eyes are telling me this is wrong. My brain's telling me I don't want 300 strange men in my neighborhood. It's a danger to my children. But I can't publicly say how wrong it is because that must mean I'm Hitler and a Nazi. So some of these people are beginning to wake up, but it's just going to take them time. But it was nice to see some of these people struggling inside with what can I say, what can I do, because the worst thing in the world is to be a Nazi.
Yeah, and that's a term that's rolled out very quickly these days. It almost rolls off the tongue as an insult. Now, wouldn't have been conceived that because it's the worst insult you can slur at anyone. But now it's thrown at you, it can be thrown at me, it can be thrown at anyone. I'm looking at a report here saying they interviewed one of these chaps who claimed that he had come from Eritrea. Claimed that he'd come from Eritrea. How do we know? We've got no identity. What are you going to do? How are you going to track them? He crossed the English Channel in a boat, and I quote this guy. He said, "I would like to work here if I can," he said. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Well, then that's it, settled. Let's just assume that he's got a good work ethic and he's not going to be any trouble. What? Because somebody says that? We don't know anything about many of these people that are coming into the country because they've no identity documents, and then they're processed when they arrive in Britain. Also, this is another point, just as we're up this one up, Nick, to think about. Aside from the fact that this is causing people a lot of concerns about the neighborhood, about safety, these are their words and not mine. Also, a 45-year-old Sue, who was interviewed about this, she said, I'm okay with this as long as they stay out of mischief, says Sue. Yeah, okay, Sue. The 45-year-old said she feared local businesses will lose out. So she does come out with a good point here. It's a shame that we have a hotel in Altrincham that had a number of rooms for people to stay in who would then spend money in the town. That's no longer being used for that purpose. So aside from the fact that this is unpopular with local residents, could affect house prices, could cause safety concerns in their words, Never mind the knock-on effect that this is going to have in business in that particular area. Less people coming in to spend money means shops do without, and maybe other businesses go to the wall. That's a casualty of this that's never really mentioned. It's only a passing thought.
Wait until the crimes start happening. So Altrincham has got a fantastic nightlife. Very rich single people aim for Altrincham. Wait until those very rich white girls who are drunk can't go to Altrincham anymore without being harassed on the streets by dozens and dozens of foreign men. Wait until the rich young man with a 10 grand Rolex watch is being mugged on the streets. Wait until that girls' school opposite this grammar school, where those girls are being catcalled and being propositioned every day. Wait until someone gets hacked with a machete that we had in London the other day, hacked to death on Remembrance Sunday in London. Wait till some of these crimes start happening, and mark my words, they will happen, because you're right. Some of those crimes would happen if you put 300 Manchester young men
Mhm.
in a hotel. You'd have crime increase then as well.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you get young men. The government have already shown us the stats. Foreign nationals commit crime in the UK at twice the rate of British born people. So we already know men commit more crime, and we already know foreign men commit at least twice as much crime. So let's wait till these people get an increase in crime, in violent crime, and that lady, that Sue, will stop saying things like, I don't mind them in the hotel as long as they're staying there. Why would you stay in a hotel? These people, again, are delusional and don't want to be called hurty names.
Uh, Another good point you made there about when you put a group of men together, it doesn't matter where they're from. If you could clone you to 150 Nick Buckleys and 150 Rick Munns, and you put 300 of us in a hotel,
Yeah.
okay, we've got free accommodation, okay, we've got meals, okay, we've got room service coming around. How long do you think it would be before you and I started to dislike the sight of each other because we were always on each other's case, or we were crossing each other in the
Mm,
corridor all the time, we're always sitting looking at each other in a common room, whatever it happens to be, no job, no work
mm,
to do, in a different land, albeit looked after well, you
yeah.
start to get restless, you start to
Mm,
get aggravated. And if they're all men in
mm,
a hotel, what happens after a period of time. They're gonna be out with frustrations and angst and built up anger. So, to my mind, again, the engineering of this, it's highly irresponsible for the government, not just to put them into an area that people have grave concerns about their
mm.
safety and the safety of their children, but also just on a human point of view, stick 300 men into a hotel together for what, 6 months, you're going to have trouble. 600 Irishmen, Scotsmen, Englishmen, Welshmen,
Mm.
Eritreans, you're going to have trouble. And again, that's grosser responsibility, I would have thought, on the part of the government. That the Home Office, to keep saying that the Home Office signed off on this, we're just following orders. So the Home Office are to blame, grosser responsibility on their part also.
It is. The answer to this is not housing migrants. The answer to this is to close our borders.
Mhm.
But the head of Border Force is too weak, too pathetic. They need sacking. The human rights lawyers all need ignoring. We need to pull out of the ECHR, the European Court on Human Rights. We need to end this problem, but none of our politicians have got a backbone to do it. So what they do, they use sticking plasters and kick the problem down the road. We can't keep doing this. We need to solve this problem, not deal with the problem, solve the problem.
Well, let's hope and believe that the solution is forthcoming, because at the moment the problem's not getting any better. It's getting worse despite pledges after
Yeah.
pledges. Oh, we're going to close the boat. We're going to stop the boats. We're going to do this. Nothing has been done. And it's not just the Labour government. They're picking up the torch and running
Yeah.
with it, that the Tories neglected this problem for a very, very long time as well. Going to bring this to a close as per now, Nick. It's been an absolute blast talking to you again. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. And just for listeners' information, check the description box below. And there'll be a pinned comment as well with links through to Nick's social media pages on Twitter, and also his own YouTube channel as well, Nick Buckley MBE. So please feel free to check out his writings. And he's an author as well. Maybe the next time you come on here, we'll talk about your book that
Yeah.
you've just published recently about My England. So it's a very passionate book, and something that you've been laboring on for some time now. And maybe we'll pick the contents of that one apart if we're spurred to talk
Mm.
again in the short term. So again, big thanks to Nick Buckley. Check out the links below this channel. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell, spread the word and spread the love around. And yeah, have a good one. This is Rick Munn, Nick Buckley, over and out for now. No risk, no reward media.